Here's your host, Giuseppe Grammatico, the franchise guide.
When you're looking to work with a company like Benetrends, my recommendation, the way I look at it is kind of like buying a home. You don't just start looking at, well, I'm going to look at $100,000 home and $5 million homes. You want to make sure that, what are my options and up to what can I afford? What can I afford? Excuse me, kind of get that pre-approval. So I recommend after having an intro call and having someone say, yeah, let's move forward. What are the next steps? I think that is the perfect time to start, because it's not like this thing, you snap your fingers and it's done. It's a conversation and maybe some time gathering financials. Would you agree that the sooner the better, just to have an idea of kind of what the expectation is, what the options are? Would you agree there?
100%. I mean, I have the privilege of working with hundreds, if not thousands of different franchise concepts, networks, people that refer their clients to us. And a lot of them ask that question, Giuseppe, when should somebody look at funding? To your point, I usually recommend after that first call, right? Because, A, you want to make sure they're serious and you want to give them a little bit light education, but B, the funding and the financial side of it arguably is the most important part of it. Right. You could be sitting across from the best suited candidate for a specific brand, but if they don't have the financial wherewithal or profile to move forward, then you could be wasting both people's time, right? So letting them know they have options, letting them get educated and more comfortable with the process about funding, getting them pre-qualified early on in the process is better for the candidate. It's better for the consultant, the brand, everybody along the process. And I use the same analogy as you do, because most of us that we speak with have went through the real estate home purchasing process, but not necessarily, purchasing a business. And it's not terribly different, right? You do want, just like you go look for homes, right? You speak to a mortgage broker, you get pre-qualified, you want to see what you're comfortable with spending, and then you look for homes that fit in that range, right? The last thing you're going to do is, get pre-qualified for $300,000 and then start looking at $1 million homes or vice versa. So the more, education the candidate has around options, and they were like, oh, wow. Because again, to your point, hey, they didn't know Rob's existed.
Right.
They might not know that they can utilize equity in home. There's all these different things people don't realize. And all of a sudden they thought this was a pipe dream. And they're like, oh, wow, I can do this.
Reality. Yeah.
It's a reality, man. So the earlier they realize that, the better for everybody involved in the process.
And that's it. And then it really helps to narrow the search based off of what you can get approved for. And just because you're getting approved for a larger amount doesn't mean you have to max it out. It could be obviously be much less, but it's good. Some people will send financials and say, well, I have this much cash and this much equity in the home. And it's like, no, you need the whole picture, because there's so many other options. So, all right. So one thing I like about your organization is that you're able to it's a holistic approach. You're looking at all aspects. It may make sense we're going to dive deep on the Rob's plan, maybe a combination of Rob's, maybe there's a home equity line of credit makes sense as well. Not that you offer, the line of credit, or in that, you would go back to the loan, to the bank, excuse me, the mortgage company. No, but you can make those suggestions, even though that's not a product or a service, I should say, that you offer. So that's one of the things I like. It's let's look at all the options. Maybe, option B makes better sense. Maybe it's a combination. So with that being said, top ways that you're seeing today funding loans, the Rob's is number one. So for everyone listening and first time listeners, rollover business startup, right? ROBS. So the first thing I hear is, is that legal? Which, why the hell would I even be bringing it up? But I just find that kind of funny. But it was actually a Benetrends that developed this, I believe, was it the late 70s, directly with the IRS?
45 years ago, our founder, Len Fisher, who was an ERISA attorney by trade, came up with this process. He was working with one of his clients who had most of his assets in a retirement account, and Len utilized the IRS code and, tax, all the information that the IRS lays out, and realize, hey, you can do this if it's done properly. So it kind of happened by accident, and he created this process. And 45 years later, 50,000 plus clients later.
Wow.
We've really created a whole industry around that product. So yeah, it's very much legal. It's very much blessed by the IRS. I think, Giuseppe, the first 15 years of us kind of in business, it was a lot more, lobbying, with the IRS to get their blessing on this.
Right.
But, they have since giving us the kind of green light and nod that, you know what, Rob's is something that's going to be here and here to stay. And you have our blessing as long as you have an organization like Benetrends or some of our competitors that are doing it properly and managing those accounts. So yeah, man, it's again, just an option most people don't realize is at their fingertips. And honestly, man, it's not very complicated. I think a lot of people, to your point, like, think it's like, I've never heard of this, so it gives them a natural kind of hesitation, but it's really no different, Giuseppe, of the rollovers most of us have done in our corporate life, right?
Right.
So I was kind of, when I sat across Len 10 years ago, when he explained this to me, he explained it to me in a way that it made sense to me. And I do that a lot with our candidates because they do come from corporate backgrounds, right? So we're both New Jersey guys, right? We got hundreds of different pharmaceutical companies here, right? So let's just say I'm, an analyst at Johnson and Johnson, right? And I have a 401k with J&J. Let's say there's $300,000 in there. And I get an opportunity to go work for Pfizer, right? Typically, what we do in scenarios like that is I'll take my J&J 401k with $300,000. I'll roll that out into an IRA, or I can just roll that into Pfizer's new 401k. And going from one qualified retirement plan, you never pay taxes and penalties on that transaction. All of us have done that in corporate life, right? You have 300, you move 400, super simple. When I'm at Pfizer and I'm going through all my onboarding and training, and they're setting me up with my benefits and, Fidelity 401k or Schwab, whatever they set me up with, and I'm going through investment options within that 401k, Giuseppe, a lot of times one of those investment options is purchasing company stock. Right? Something I know I did in my technology career. You've probably done it. Most of the people that we work with have done it. At the time, I didn't realize it was kind of setting off a chain of events, right? So if I look at that 300K and I say, you know what, I'll take 100 of it and invest it in Pfizer, I can do that. And then what happens is my 401k just now owns the amount of shares that I just purchased for Pfizer. And that $100,000 that I used to purchase it, it doesn't remain in my Fidelity account. It doesn't float in financial purgatory somewhere. It goes to Pfizer in one of their many corporate checking accounts that company could now use for whatever legitimate business expense that they want, right? R&D, product, salaries, real estate, anything. So what Len figured out and what we do at Benetrends is literally that same exact chain of events, but instead of doing it for Johnson or Pfizer or Amazon, we set up Minatelli Enterprises, right? Within Minatelli Enterprises, we set up a qualified customized retirement plan. And then we can take that same $300,000 from my old J&J 401k. We roll it into Minatelli Enterprises, new qualified retirement plan. And just like before, going from one qualified plan to the next, no taxes and penalties. And then what happens is the retirement account that Benetrends created for me is now just going to purchase privately held stock in that Minatelli Enterprises. And then through that privately held stock purchase, Giuseppe, the retirement account's going to own privately held shares. $300,000 now goes to Mike Minatelli's corporate checking account that I could now use for any legitimate business expense. So that can be the franchise fees, it can be a build out of my location if I'm having a brick and mortar, trucks, equipment. It can also be used to pay yourself a salary, which is a lot of times very hard to get from a loan. And it can also be combined with SBA or another form of funding to get additional funds to help secure, your investment. So yeah, again, that helped it make sense to me 10 years ago. And when I try to explain it that way, Giuseppe, it does seem to resonate, especially with the people that have done it in their corporate life, right?
No, it absolutely does when you kind of say it that way. And that explanation actually is really helpful because people start getting into the weeds on this. And I go, I'm not the expert in this
Yeah.
area. We work with Benetrends, we work at Jade, we work with Jade every single day, back and forth. There's always this, you probably never heard of this scenario. It's always one of those conversation starters, but she's
Yeah.
been really helpful
She's
in
great.
starting that. So that is, I guess, a benefit there is when I'm looking at it, it seems like it's your money. So you get access to the funding quicker and you don't have to worry about note payments every month, right? It's just, you got a new business, right?
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of advantages to it. It is, to your point, a very quick way to get, funding, right? From start to finish, you're looking at usually 3 to 4 weeks from engagement to that money sitting in your corporate checking account. Even Giuseppe, for the people that have cash and liquidity
Mhm.
and they learn that this is an option, they quickly say to themselves, well, if it's sitting in cash, that means I've probably already paid my taxes on it, right? Cash is good to have for your day-to-day life, right? Becky needs braces, Johnny's going to college, trees fell down in my house. Cash is always good to have. So once they realize I can access my pre-tax dollars in sometimes an underperforming retirement account, I'd rather keep my cash here
Right.
and then access these pre-tax dollars to help fund the business. So you have the aspect of using versus post-tax. Some people like the diversification of it, right? If you have somebody that has substantial amount of money within IRAs and retirement accounts, if they have $1 million and they can just pull 200 of it, take it out of Wall Street and the market and say, hey, now I'm investing it in Giuseppe and my business. It's diversified, right? So it's not tied to Wall Street. It's tied to me. And then you have the individual Giuseppe that just likes control, right? Maybe there's some distrust about Wall Street and, the market. And they say, you know what? I want to have control over my money and my destiny. God forbid it doesn't work out. There's nobody to blame but me and myself. I want to invest and bet on me, which is another thing that people, like to do. So there's a lot of different ways that people view this. And again, to our point, most people go into this conversation not even knowing or realizing that this is an option.
Awesome. No, that is really helpful. And for anyone that wants to learn a little bit about the Robs or anything we're talking about today, we're definitely sharing this episode since you do a much better job in explaining it. Yeah, especially when the questions start popping up. So this is one avenue of many. Talk to us about another product or service is the SBA loans.
Early consultation is key. Now let's explore another major funding avenue, SBA loans. What are they? How do they work? And how do they compare to using ROBs?
Thanks for tuning in. If you want to learn how to make the transition from corporate to owning your franchise, join Giuseppe on the next episode. You can also follow on all social media platforms and achieve financial and time freedom today.